Love is shown in repetition. Not spectacle love. Real love is not something you shout from rooftops. It isn't measured by how dramatic your gestures are or how loudly you proclaim your affections. We live in a culture obsessed with spectacle, with the big moment, with emotional fireworks and cinematic declarations. But the truth, perhaps the uncomfortable truth, is this: love isn't grand, it's consistent. You don't prove your love by what you do once in a while. You prove it by what you do every single day. That's a hard pill to swallow for people addicted to intensity. Because intensity is seductive. It feels good, it feels powerful, it feels true for a moment. But intensity is cheap. Anyone can be intense for a weekend. Anyone can light a fire and make it blaze. The question is, can you keep it burning? And that's where repetition enters. Love is built through repetition. It's in the text you send, not when it's easy, but when you're tired. It's in the way you remember how they like their coffee. It's in the tone you use when you're frustrated but still choose to speak gently. It's in the way you keep showing up, not because it's always thrilling, but because it matters. If you want to understand who really loves you, don't look at what they do on your birthday. Look at how they treat you on a random Tuesday, when they're busy, when they're stressed, when there's nothing in it for them. Because real love isn't opportunistic, it's reliable. It's not the surprise bouquet. It's the fact that they listen when you speak. It's the way they notice the little things you care about and quietly act on them. It's not always saying, "I love you." It's proving it without having to say a word. This kind of love requires something very few people are willing to give today: discipline. Why discipline? Because emotions are fleeting. One day you feel close, the next you feel distant. But love isn't about chasing your feelings. It's about honoring your commitment, about making a decision that says, even when I don't feel like it, I'm going to show up. I'm going to choose you, not just when it's easy, but especially when it's hard. Discipline is doing the small things well, over and over again, without applause, without recognition, and without expecting some emotional high every time you do. Love isn't a performance, it's a pattern. And this is where most people fail, because the modern idea of love is emotionally immature. It equates love with intensity. If someone doesn't overwhelm you with attention, if they don't flood you with affection, if the highs don't feel like euphoria, we say, maybe this isn't it. But let me tell you something. The most dangerous people are the ones who love you loudly in the beginning and disappear in the end. Why? Because they confuse your nervous system. They teach you to associate chaos with connection, and when the silence comes, it feels like betrayal. But it wasn't betrayal, it was instability dressed up as romance. Repetition is the antidote to this kind of chaos. It builds trust. It regulates anxiety. It creates a rhythm, a structure, where love can actually grow.
Not dramatically, steadily.
And that's how real bonds are formed, not through explosions, but through consistency, through a pattern of safety, a rhythm of care, a discipline of devotion. If someone tells you they love you but you can't count on them, that's not love, that's noise. And if you find yourself trying to impress someone with grand moments, stop. Impress them with consistency. Be the person who remembers, who listens, who learns, who follows through. Because in the end, you don't build love by saying, "I love you" loudly. You build it by living like you mean it quietly, over and over again. So take your eyes off the spectacle. Stop looking for the fireworks. Fireworks fade. Real love is in the flame that stays lit, low, warm, and unwavering. It's not loud, it's there. Every day, without fail. That's what love looks like when it grows up. Stability is more powerful than passion. We live in a culture that romanticizes passion. We're told that love should feel like a rush, a whirlwind, a consuming fire. And yes, passion has its place. It can light the match. It can stir the soul. But if you think passion alone will carry a relationship through time, through hardship, through the dark nights of disappointment, then you've mistaken emotional intensity for emotional maturity. Because here's the truth, passion is a spark, but stability is the structure. Without stability, passion burns out. It can't sustain itself. It's too volatile, it's too reactive. Passion is based on feeling, on chemistry, attraction, spontaneity, and feelings are unreliable. They shift, they vanish, they return in waves. You cannot build a long-term commitment on something so unstable. But stability, that's different. Stability is deliberate. It's not just about how you feel about the other person, but how you act toward them when those feelings fluctuate. Stability is built on discipline, boundaries, routines, and a deep respect for responsibility. It's the quiet decision you make each day to choose the other person, not because it's easy, not because it's thrilling, but because it's right. Passion makes promises. Stability keeps them. Let me be clear. This isn't about becoming emotionally numb or settling for something lifeless. It's not about trading excitement for boredom. It's about understanding that the strongest relationships are not the ones that burn the brightest, but the ones that survive the fire. Think about a tree with deep roots. It doesn't move with every gust of wind. It doesn't fall apart with the seasons. It bends, it adjusts, but it remains grounded. That's what stability does to love. It roots it. So when chaos comes, and it will, the relationship doesn't collapse under pressure. People often leave good relationships because the passion fades. They panic. They say, it doesn't feel the same anymore. Of course it doesn't. No real commitment feels the same after 5 years as it did in the first 5 weeks. But that shift doesn't mean love is dying. It means love is maturing. And that's uncomfortable for many people because maturity requires effort. It requires self-regulation. It demands that you put someone else's needs on the same level as your own. Passion lets you get away with being self-centered. Stability forces you to grow up. In a stable relationship, you don't just ride the highs, you endure the lows. You navigate conflict without abandoning each other. You learn how to speak when you're hurt, how to listen when you're angry, how to stay even when your feelings are screaming, leave. This is where strength is built. Not in the passionate declarations, but in the daily sacrifices, the uncomfortable conversations, the commitment to healing instead of blaming, the willingness to stay through the discomfort, knowing that the only way out is through. And ironically, when you build a relationship on stability, the passion doesn't disappear. It deepens. It becomes quieter, yes, less explosive, but more meaningful. It turns into a deep current that runs beneath everything you do. A knowing, a trust, a safety that says, I'm not going anywhere. Not because I have to stay, but because I've chosen to stay. So if you're measuring your relationship only by how exciting it feels, you're setting yourself up for disappointment. Passion fades, always. That's not a failure, it's a transition. And the question isn't, how do I get the spark back? It's, how do I build something that lasts when the spark dims? The answer is simple, but not easy. You trade volatility for steadiness. You trade temporary intensity for lifelong reliability. You trade the roller coaster for the rock. And in doing so, you discover a deeper kind of love, one that doesn't need constant reassurance because it has a foundation built in truth, effort, and presence. That's what stability offers. Not just love that feels good, but love that does good, day in and day out. And when life gets hard, and it will, that stable kind of love is the only thing that will carry you through. Love requires responsibility, not just feeling. We talk about love like it's a feeling, a spark, a chemistry. And yes, feelings play a role, but if that's all love is to you, then you'll never sustain it. Feelings fluctuate. They're affected by sleep, stress, hormones, weather, and time. One day you're head over heels, the next you feel distant and irritable. If your idea of love is built on how you feel in the moment, you're building your house on sand. Because here's the truth. Love is not a feeling. Love is a responsibility. Responsibility isn't exciting. It doesn't make for good rom-coms or viral wedding speeches. But responsibility is the foundation on which everything lasting is built. It says, I choose to care for this. I will tend to it. I will protect it, grow it. And when things get hard, I won't run, I'll rise. When you take responsibility for love, you're not just reacting to emotion, you're committing to action. That means you show up even when you're tired. You listen even when it's inconvenient. You speak the truth even when it would be easier to stay silent. You apologize. You forgive. You take ownership not only for how you feel, but for how you affect the other person. Because love isn't just about what you feel, it's about what you do. And more than that, it's about what you maintain. The problem is people want the rewards of love without the weight of it. They want the intimacy without the vulnerability, the comfort without the consistency, the connection without the confrontation. But you can't have one without the other. Love is not freedom from responsibility. It is the most demanding responsibility you will ever take on. And if you avoid that, you don't love, you indulge. Think about this. You cannot love someone and simultaneously refuse to be accountable to them. You cannot say, "I love you," while refusing to take responsibility for the impact of your words, your actions, your absence. Love without responsibility is fantasy. It's emotional escapism, and it will collapse under the pressure of real life. Taking responsibility in love means asking yourself hard questions. Am I safe for this person to be vulnerable with? Do I consistently follow through on what I say? Do I protect the emotional and psychological space between us? Am I helping this person grow, or am I holding them back? These questions require courage, because love demands self-confrontation. It reveals our selfishness, our defensiveness, our wounds, and if we're not ready to take ownership of those things, we will project them. We'll blame our partner for what we haven't dealt with in ourselves. That's why love is one of the most demanding psychological tasks a human being can undertake. It forces you to grow, not because your partner demands it, but because the relationship itself will expose every place where you are still immature. Love will teach you that being right is often less important than being connected, that listening is more powerful than proving a point, that sometimes love means being quiet not because you're weak, but because peace matters more than pride. That's responsibility. And it's not just toward the other person, it's toward yourself, because to love well, you must become someone worthy of love. That means healing. It means facing your patterns. It means breaking the cycles you inherited from your past so you don't bleed them into your future. It means growing in emotional literacy, in patience, in empathy, and in strength. This is the real work of love. It's not always romantic. It's not always passionate. But it's real. And it's rare. And here's the paradox. The more responsibility you take for your love, the deeper it becomes. Because love rooted in responsibility becomes trust. And trust is the soil where intimacy grows, not shallow closeness, but the kind of connection that endures through storms. That's the kind of love that changes lives. Not the love that sweeps you off your feet, but the love that stands with you when everything else falls apart. So, stop chasing the high. Stop measuring your relationship by how in love you feel in the moment. Start asking, how much responsibility am I willing to take for this love? Because the moment you stop making love about how it feels and start making it about how you show up, that's the moment it becomes real. And that's when it becomes strong enough to last. Consistency is the language of security. When people talk about love, they often speak in dramatic terms. Intensity, fireworks, passion. But those things, as loud and exciting as they are, don't create safety. They don't create trust. And without trust, love cannot last. Because love, at its core, is not just about connection. It's about security. And how do you build security? With consistency. Consistency is love's grammar. It's the way love speaks, not in grand declarations, but in repeated signals that say, "You are safe here. I am not going to disappear. I mean what I say. I follow through." It's not loud. It doesn't need to be. Because consistency isn't about performance. It's about presence. We crave security in our relationships because we are wired for it. From childhood, our brains develop in response to how consistently we are loved. If love was unpredictable, if it came and went, if it was hot one day and cold the next, we develop anxiety. We learn to question safety. We become hypervigilant, trying to detect when the next emotional absence will arrive. The same is true in adult relationships. If someone says they love you but their behavior is erratic, your nervous system never relaxes. You stay on edge. You start questioning, will they still be here tomorrow? Can I count on them when I'm struggling? Do they mean what they say, or is this just another moment of intensity that will vanish in a week? This uncertainty erodes connection. It chips away at trust, because love that cannot be trusted is love that cannot grow. But when someone is consistent, something profound happens. You stop guarding. You start breathing. You let down your defenses. not because you're naive, but because consistency teaches you it's safe to do so. And once that safety is established, deeper love becomes possible. Because we can only love to the degree that we feel safe. Let's be clear, consistency isn't about perfection. No one is flawless, we all get tired, we all mess up. But the consistent person acknowledges their failures. They own them. They repair, they return, they keep showing up. That's the difference. And in today's world, that kind of reliability is radical. We live in an age of instant gratification and short attention spans. When things get hard, the temptation is to ghost, to leave, to replace. But the mature person, the person who understands the weight of real love, knows that security isn't built by always getting it right. It's built by refusing to quit. Ask yourself, what builds trust faster? Being told an I love you, once with intensity, or being shown a son I love you, 100 times with consistent care, effort, and reliability. It's the second every time. Think about this practically. If a friend only shows up when it's convenient, can you rely on them? If your partner fluctuates wildly in how they treat you, is that love or instability? If a parent only expresses affection when they're in a good mood, does the child feel safe? Of course not. Consistency is what separates real love from emotional chaos. In fact, inconsistency in love often signals unresolved emotional patterns, attachment wounds, fear of intimacy, or an inability to self-regulate. If you want to love well, you have to outgrow that. You have to become someone others can rely on, someone who doesn't just act out of impulse or emotion, but out of character and principle. Because here's what people really want, not perfection, not romance novels, not emotional highs. They want to feel safe. They want to know, when I reach for you, you'll be there. That's love. Not noise, not promises, but evidence. Repeated, trustworthy evidence. The strongest couples, the strongest friendships, the strongest families, they are not built on peak moments. They're built on patterns. Healthy, reliable, secure patterns. Patterns of honesty, patterns of kindness, patterns of presence. That's what consistency looks like. And that's what creates safety deep enough for love to not just survive, but thrive. So the question is not, teen, how much do you love them? The real question is, can they count on you? Because love is not measured by intensity, but by reliability. By what you do when it's boring, when it's inconvenient, when no one's clapping. And most importantly, when the other person needs you the most. Be that person, the one who doesn't just say the right things, but shows up again and again and again. Because in a world of noise, consistency is the most powerful way to say, "On, you are safe with me."